Blackwell.
Good afternoon, my lady. We're going to begin this session with the evidence of Dr. Glenn Grundle, who is appearing remotely from Belfast. May he be sworn, please?
Good afternoon, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Good afternoon, yes, I can.
Could you please hold the Bible in your right hand and repeat after me? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Dr. Grundle, I know that you would have liked to have been here in person, but for health reasons, you weren't able to travel. Nevertheless, we're very grateful for you making yourself available to give your evidence today.
Yeah, apologies, I really wanted to be there, but it was to guarantee giving evidence, it was safer to do it remotely. But at least you get the Northern Ireland evidence from Northern Ireland today.
Yes.
No apologies are necessary.
Thank you.
Now, I hope that you have before you a copy of the witness statement which you
I do.
You do, thank you, which you and Fiona Humphreys have jointly prepared on behalf of Northern Ireland COVID bereaved Families for Justice. Is that right?
It is, yes.
Thank you. For our records, it's INQ 000 657 842. And I know that you are keen to give the evidence that's contained within that statement about your mother and the circumstances of her death and your bereavement that followed. And I will come to that. But if I may, I'd like to begin by asking some questions about the organisation and going through some of the topics that that you have knowledge of in accordance with the members of that organisation. So Northern Ireland COVID Bereaved Families for Justice is a branch of the UK-wide group. It was established in December 2021 as both a support and an action group with the purpose of coordinating activity in Northern Ireland, in particular into the handling of the pandemic and leading calls for a separate Northern Ireland public inquiry. Is that right?
It is, yes.
Yes. And in your work with the group, there have been calls made for changes to be made in certain matters that the government and public bodies need, in the group's opinion, to be called to account for in relation to the circumstances leading to the deaths of the members of the group during the COVID pandemic. Is that right?
It is, yes.
All right. It is made up of members who have lost loved ones, both young and old, to COVID-19 in a variety of circumstances, including in care homes, in hospitals, and in the community. Is that right?
It is, yes.
Thank you. Now, the inquiry has already received evidence from members of your group, which in part address some of the issues which we are looking into in Module 10, that is the impact of the COVID pandemic and the restrictions that followed on members of society. And I'm just going to mention some of the statements that have been provided in previous modules because you set these out within your statement. Module 1, Brenda Doherty. Module 2, Catriona Miles. Module 2C, Marion Reynolds. Module 3, Catherine Todd. Module 4, Fiona Clark. Module 6, Tom Black, Martina Ferguson, Agnes McClusker and Gregory McQuinty. And Module 7, Hazel Gray. And I know that my lady will take into account the parts of those statements that relate to the issues in this module. I want to now deal with several topics that I know you have covered within your statement served on behalf of the group. And in taking you through these, Dr. Grundle, I want to also put up on screen some excerpts from Northern Ireland contributors to the Every Story Matters campaign. Now, I know that you personally have expressed your opinion that you would have preferred the quotes of respondents to the campaign to have remained identifiable and not to have been anonymised. But nevertheless, you agree that the contributions which we're going to deal with remain valid.
Oh, very much so, yes.
Thank you. So could we begin, please, in relation to restrictions on contact during the pandemic period, to look at the Every Story Matters record. It's INQ 000 659 894. Thank you. And can we go to page 22 and to highlight the two paragraphs at the bottom of the page and onto the next page, please? Thank you. We can see that the pandemic restrictions that were imposed meant that many family members and friends were unable to be with their loved ones at the end of their life. This meant that the last time they saw their loved one was when they were taken away in an ambulance or before they went into a hospital or care setting. Many bereaved people said they felt completely unprepared and shocked when their loved one died. You never prepare yourself for somebody passing on, especially if you see them today and then they're coughing tomorrow. The next day, they can't breathe. Do you know what I mean? It was so quick. I remember we didn't have a chance to even say goodbye because the moment that she left the house and went to the hospital, we couldn't visit her. I think from the day that she knew, she passed on within 5 days. And then a bereaved daughter from Northern Ireland. I begged for me and my sister to be with Daddy when he died. We weren't even given that. Different trusts had different rules. Some were allowed to see them and we weren't. It was absolutely horrendous. Now, are those sentiments also reflected, Dr. Grundle, in the evidence that you have collected on behalf of your group?
Yes, very much so. I mean, my own personal experience, my mum left in an ambulance and I never saw her again. The door shut and that was it. I never even saw her body. I have no acceptance. I have no closure. I have no peace over it. I go to her grave at least twice a week and I could conceivably turn around and she would be there because I have no acceptance of what actually happened to her. The last I saw was the doors been shut in an ambulance. And as you're aware from, we'll probably discuss in a little while, the circumstances were particularly traumatic at the end.
Yes, thank you very much. Could we go down to page 23, please, of the record and scroll down and highlight that passage? Thank you very much. The uncertainty about what happened to their loved ones in the final days has left many family members heartbroken. These unanswered questions about the death of their loved one have often had a detrimental impact on mental health and complicated their grieving process. A bereaved person from Northern Ireland said, "We lost our daddy early in January 2021. He was 68, life and soul of the party. It was the most surreal experience, and over 3 years on, I have nightmares. Did he suffer? Was it him in the coffin? Did we cremate the right person? Amongst a dozen more questions we will never get the answers to." And then a bereaved niece from England. "I think the most heartbreaking thing for us was that he passed away on his own, alone, and we don't know if he was in pain, if he wasn't in pain, or what was happening. I mean, it just feels unknown, and it has affected us a lot, to be honest. My mum especially. She went through depression after." Thank you. So, not having contact with your loved one, not knowing what happened to them in their final days and hours, how does that affect the bereaved, Dr. Grundle, and how does it prevent them from being able to move on?
Well, the isolation and separation it leads you to believe that you weren't there for someone. It also causes doubt over what actually happened. My own experience, I was told certain things by staff that weren't true. They were our eyes and ears at the time, and they unfortunately didn't act in the way that they should have done.
Yeah.
That separation, I was the person who sort of looked out for my mum in every aspect. I knew everything, every little sign with her, and I wasn't there to see everything. So you're left with the feeling that you could have helped if you'd actually been there.
Yes.
But the main overriding sentiment, I think, is probably at the end for everyone, where we know our loved ones died on their own, and we weren't there. That separation tears us apart. It's things that I found out after the state my mum had been in, and I wasn't there. I wonder if she felt let down, if she wondered why I wasn't there. That separation is something that cannot ever happen again.
Thank you. I want to move on to look at some parts of your witness statement that deal with communication or a lack of communication. And it's at INQ 000657842. If we could go to page 11, please, and highlight paragraphs 37, 38 and 39, we can see the impact on mental health and well-being on these three people. Paula Crichton lost her mother, May, on the 12th of November 2020. After her death, she describes trying to get in touch with mental health organisations, but says there was never anybody there. Laura O'Neill lost her father, John Joseph O'Neill, on the 13th of December 2000. I think that should be 2020. Following his death, she states, "I'm in terrible physical and mental shape. It never goes away. It stays with you forever." And Annetta Milliken, whose father's death has already been referenced in the statement, describes how she and her mother were significantly affected by her father's death, noting that her mother's illness was significantly affected and that it had caused ongoing mental health issues. She had attended cognitive behaviour therapy weekly in hospital as a result, but says that there was no further assistance, and she says, "Our lives are shattered." And are those sentiments reflected in a lot of the information that your organisation gathered about the effects of grief during the pandemic period?
We're all damaged and damaged beyond repair. This is about impact, and probably the greatest demonstration that I can give of that impact is that I go to bed every night and I don't sleep very well. But when I do, I really don't care if I wake up in the morning. In fact, it would be a blessing if I didn't. And that is the impact of what has happened, of how we have been damaged. That is the mental impact of that. And that also goes into the physical side of things, because we are suffering with physical health problems as well. Many of us, and I include myself in this, because of our experience with hospitals, we don't want to see healthcare professionals. We put things off because of how we were treated in the aftermath of our loved one's death. We don't want to deal with them.
Yes. The inquiry has also heard of a dismissive attitude by some of what happened during COVID. And I'd like to just look at the roundtable summary report, please, which is at 588201. Thank you. Funerals, burials and bereavement support. And then turn to page 13 and highlight the passage of information that was provided by your organisation, Dr. Grundle. Thank you. COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice Northern Ireland also shared how many of their group members felt throughout the pandemic that they had to justify how their loved one died. This was because everyone was hearing about COVID-19 and forming opinions about COVID-19 deaths. They described how having to answer to people about their loved one's death became an additional burden that intensified their feelings of isolation and alienation from others in their lives. They reflected on how questions they received about their loved one's death, such as asking how old they were or whether COVID-19 was real, belittled the losses they and their members had experienced, leaving them feeling angry and dismissed. And are those sentiments that you acknowledge and reflect?
Very much so. Again, I was questioned constantly about, even before my mum died, while she was in the hospital, people on the street would shout over to me, asking me questions. It was a new virus. Everyone wanted to know everything about it, how it affected you. There are so many things about COVID bereavement that are unique that you will not experience with any other type. All those questions, some people were genuinely concerned, others were just wanting to get information. But we were also faced with, especially early on in the pandemic, and my mum died in April 2020, we were faced with every second word was COVID everywhere. The source of your loved one's death pounded you from everywhere. And we also had to deal with the daily counts, the people who were in hospital, the people who died, knowing that our loved ones were part of that statistic. The interest in the virus on the street, really, and from everyone was so intense. And you're right with the quote is right about lives sort of being dismissed. Oh, she was old, or oh,
yes.
In my mum's case, she had MS, or there were certain, and this is something that we can look at with the health authorities as well. My mum, first thing they did on arrival at A&E was try to get her to agree to a DNA CPR, simply because she was 73 and she had MS. Two categories, and I emphasize categories, not human beings, that were deemed jetsam to the health authorities, an already sinking health service. And the same, I think, could be said for the loved ones who, the members who lost their loved ones when they were jettisoned into the care homes.
Yes. Thank you. And let's look at the experiences of some others living in Northern Ireland who were bereaved. And let's go back to the Every Story Matters record, please, and down to page 47. And can we highlight the contributions from those in Northern Ireland? Thank you. We heard from contributors in Northern Ireland who were unable to hold traditional wakes in their homes before the funeral. Friends and family not being able to come together to mourn and share memories about their loved one made it difficult for people to process their grief. We have a 3-day wake. The body would have been brought home to us there, and people, friends, family, cousins, acquaintances, whatever, all would have been allowed to come along and have some soup 24/7, basically. So that didn't happen. My brother's coffin went straight from the undertakers to the church to, there was a ceremony with family and friends, social distancing and whatnot, and then internment at the adjoining graveyard. And another, it was still difficult. It took us a lot longer, I think, to kind of heal or to move on and accept things than what it would normally have done. Because, like, what you would have done is you would have had your wake and you would have had everybody round, a lot of families and friends, and everybody who'd have told stories and you would have reminisced and all that sort of stuff. And that always helps with the grieving process. Whereas this time, we didn't have that same kind of support network. My husband died alone in hospital. We had 25 at a very small funeral. We had no wake, and that's important here. It's where we tell stories and get together and grieve. I don't know whether I've grieved properly. And my mother spent 5 weeks in hospital, and I decided there was nothing stopping me from getting her home after she died. I got her home for 3 nights, and I argued with them. Yes, her coffin was closed, but nothing was stopping me from bringing her home. She was a lady and deserved to come home. A lot of people were against it and didn't come to pay their respects. That's fine, but it's not their mother. If I didn't do that, I'd be a lot worse today. I was proud of bringing her home. Having a wake and the whole process around funerals is very important to many, but particularly to those in Northern Ireland, isn't it?
It is very much so again. Personally, my mum's funeral was restricted to 10 people, short graveside service. There was nothing that was able to be done before. I slightly selfishly, I think, I didn't mind the restriction on the funeral as such because I had to speak, and I'm not actually that comfortable with public speaking. But I felt guilty that I wasn't able to give her a proper send-off, and a few months later, I did have a memorial service with a piper and that for her. But that's only my own sort of personal experience. As regards others, it is extremely important. I have a friend who, I don't think you'll mind me saying, who lost his mum a couple of years ago, and they had a wake. I think it was something slightly stronger than soup that they had, but it was a great occasion. Well, not a great occasion, but it really helped them all come together as a family and share memories and really support each other and come to terms with what had happened. And that is very much part of the culture here. I would like to sort of separate certain elements of that immediate process after a death, where with the wake, and the wake is part of that process where it helps you to come to terms with the death. I can give a contrasting example. The other person who's the most important in my life was my mum and I always said that we were best friends, and we were mum and son, but best friends as well. But I had a best mate from the age of 3 years old, a guy called Martin. We grew up just the next street from each other. He died suddenly in 2018. Thanks to his wife, I got to go into the funeral parlour on 2 different days. I sat with him. I know he wasn't there, but I got to tell him things I wanted to. I told him I loved him. I got to give him a kiss on the forehead. He was someone I loved deeply. As kids, we were inseparable, like twins. I miss him every day. But I accept his death because I saw him. I was able to sort of say goodbye in a certain way. It hurts, but with my mum, there is no acceptance of her death. I wasn't allowed to view her body, which I can't understand because it could have been done from behind a screen. I wasn't even allowed to identify her body, and I was her requested next of kin and her nominated first contact. And that is all part of that post-death process of coming to terms. The wake comes into that as well. The wake is the support aspect of that. You can also add in the physical contact here where it was the extreme social distancing at the time, and I had so many people coming up to me and saying, I wish I could give you a hug, but I can't. That went on so long that I hugged my mum just before she went in the ambulance. She's still the last person I hugged properly until just before Christmas. I hadn't, this past Christmas, I hadn't hugged anyone in any way whatsoever. The longer it went on, the more significance it took that my mum was the last person I'd hugged.
Yes.
A dear friend and my brother and his wife, I gave sort of half hugs to just before Christmas, and that's the closest I've got. I know that's not normal, and that's a good demonstration of pandemic grief. There are so many things that the trauma causes, and that is a major part of it was the restrictions for so many on the funerals and that chance to say goodbye properly.
Thank you. We're just going to look at one other example of this that comes from your witness statement, please. And it's at paragraph 25 at page 9. If we could put that on screen. Thank you very much. Francis Doherty's mother, Mary Magdalene Mitchell, passed away on the 25th of March 2020. They were left waiting all day before the funeral parlour could tell them what was permitted for her funeral. She had been deeply religious and a member of the Legion of Mary. She says, "My mother was a deeply religious lady and was a member of the Legion of Mary Catholic group. As such, it was her wish to be dressed in a blue and white gown as she lay in the coffin. The undertakers tried to place her body in the gown. However, her body had been sealed in a body bag and could not be opened. They were able to drape the shroud over the body bag as a mark of respect. My mother's rosary beads were taken off her and disinfected due to potential contamination. She had to be buried with her beads, and we pleaded with the undertaker how important this was to her. Only one person was allowed to go to the funeral. We could not pick out one of the 5 siblings to go. The cremation was booked for Monday, the 30th of March of 2021. However, this could not go ahead because the doctors had not certified the death and released the certificate. She was cremated on the 1st of April 2020. The fact that we had to opt for a cremation was against everything Mum believed in, but we were not allowed any other option at that time. We all met at 12 noon on the 1st of April 2020 and said a decade of the Rosary. We were able to video her going into the crematorium as far as we could." And have you heard many stories from your members about how their usual and important religious procedures could not be followed or were curtailed significantly in line with pandemic restrictions?
Yeah, I think everyone, certainly in the early days of the pandemic, faced restrictions in that way. And again, it's that feeling that you haven't done enough. And when it's something religious and when it's the case that maybe the faith has been extremely important to them, then you feel that you're letting them down. If I could just lead on with the comments there about the handling of the body there.
Yes, certainly.
Because this is something that many of us are concerned with. We are left with questions that we shouldn't have. My mum couldn't get through the embalming process. I have conflicting accounts from the hospital and the funeral directors. Now, I have no reason to disbelieve to doubt anything to do with the funeral directors. The hospital told me that it was a sealed bag that could not be opened. The funeral directors told me that they were able to do a little bit of preparation. It also involves something very important to the group. It's left an awful lot of people traumatized, is the belongings. that are to go into a coffin or that are to be given back.
Yes.
Many are left with unanswered questions. I was given my mum's phone. She spoke to me in that less than 24 hours before she died. But I wasn't allowed to have her jewellery. Apparently, she had to be buried with everything that she had on, but she would not have had that amount of jewellery on, and the funeral directors agreed. Also, a necklace would have been taken off the chest X-ray, so that there is no reason to give back a phone, which apparently the reason is a source of contamination. Yet there would have been more chance of contamination from the phone than jewellery that she wasn't wearing. And also that mentions cremation in there.
Yes.
Immediately after my mum's death, a nurse tried to convince me to choose cremation, which is not in a nurse's remit. And it is suspicious as well.
All right. Well, we're going to come very shortly to your mother's story. But before we do that, I just want to touch upon one final topic of concern that you express within the statement, and that relates to bereavement support or the lack of bereavement support. You say at paragraph 32 that one related issue raised by your members is a concern about a lack of post-bereavement support, either financial support or by way of periods of leave from employment. And you give the example of Anne-Marie O'Neill, who worked in a care home in the dementia unit. She contracted COVID-19. Her father died after contracting COVID-19. Her mental health suffered following both of those episodes, and she was found not to be mentally fit to work. But she was given very limited bereavement leave pay, and she is now reliant on benefits. She continues to have difficulty with her mental health. And you say this at paragraph 35, that her overall treatment supports the conclusion that there was and remains a lack of provision for bereavement leave, and tends to highlight the difficulties that this can cause for those who have been bereaved. Her case also raises questions about whether longer periods of bereavement leave and greater financial support for the bereaved would not only be acts of humanity, but would also make financial sense in order to avoid losing people such as Anne-Marie to long-term unemployment. And although Anne-Marie's example there is given to underline the concerns that you have, is hers not a unique case, and is her story similar to that received by your organisation from other people too?
Yes, I don't think there was any support in any way for anyone. Again, especially early on in the pandemic, but it didn't really improve. There was no real understanding of what people were experiencing at the time. I was sort of palmed off a couple of times by the hospital towards bereavement counselling, but it was totally inadequate. I think someone sent me a PDF file at one point. My GP put me on to bereavement counselling, but it was by telephone. And that's not something, I'm not sure, maybe someone with experience of doing it by video link, maybe it works better, but you're already suffering from isolation, and it's not something that I think can be done by telephone. You need contact. You need a human being with you. So I don't think there's any support system set up for people to deal with, first of all, losing a loved one, and secondly, all that came with that, all the financial implications and things, and the total impact on every aspect of their lives.
Thank you. Turning now then to the experience of your mother, Milda Grundle, and of your experience of trying to help her both in life and then trying to discover in death what had happened to her in hospital. Would you like to take us through her story and the concerns that you have, please?
Yes, certainly. I'll try to go through as many details as possible. You can interrupt if you think I'm getting bogged down. So my mum was taken to hospital on the 3rd of April, 2020. She was immediately put under pressure to agree to a DNA CPR. No one was allowed to go with her. I spent much of that first evening trying to get in touch with her. I finally spoke to her and she was terrified. She was alone, very ill, vulnerable, and she was really scared about the DNA CPR. And to give you an idea of what that was like, I can give you a contrasting example. She had primary progressive MS and she had suffered from aspiration pneumonia on 2 occasions in 2019. She was in hospital for a period of about 4 weeks and then a period of about 6 weeks, which was broken up by a failed discharge, which I argued against. I was told on, I think, at least 2 occasions that she was seriously ill and to possibly prepare myself for the worst. There were 2 consultants involved in her treatment at that time. The same 2 consultants were involved in her treatment in 2020. A DNA CPR was never mentioned at all in 2019, yet it was the first thing they tried to do in 2020 on arrival at A&E. I started the next day I spent trying to get in touch with the consultant. He apparently had the wrong phone number for me, but I did finally speak to him in the evening. And he told me that in his opinion, my mum should have a DNA CPR because she, in his opinion again, she had no quality of life as she used a hoist and had carers, which is a definition that fits so many disabled people. I was absolutely shocked. I argued with him on the telephone. I told him that there would be repercussions if anything ever happened to my mum. I couldn't believe that someone was playing God, which can never be allowed to happen. Quality of life is something that only that person knows. I'm the only person who knows what the quality of my life is like, and it can never, ever be defined in that way. I hung up and immediately, that was my mum was taken in on the Friday. That was the Saturday evening. I started emailing politicians, and I'd had some contact with the media, Victoria, Derbyshire, and BBC over a surgical mesh campaign. I got in touch with them. I contacted friends, my old thesis supervisor, started trying to rally people. I was so shocked about it. I then did a couple of interviews on the Tuesday, I think. I got that consultant removed. I was given assurances that the fact that my mum had MS and she used a hoist and had carers would never be a factor in anything to do with her treatment. We got the consultant who had successfully treated her in 2019 involved, and both of us were delighted because we both trusted and really liked her. It was a shock then to find in my mum's medical records a DNA CPR mentioning MS and hoisted, and also frailty on it. I'd managed to keep my mum out of hospital for about 7 months before that. So there was no need to mention anything about frailty. She was doing well. We were happy with the fact that the consultant had taken over, but they continued to try to persuade her to agree to a DNA CPR. She didn't agree. She accepted what they told her was that she wouldn't survive and they weren't going to do anything else. They would not allow her the chance of a ventilator in ICU. They set the ceiling of care at CPAP on the ward. And she accepted that to a certain extent because she was told nothing would work. However, at the same time, Dr. Tom Black, the chair of the Northern Ireland BMA at the time, was on air telling people that in relation to the resources, hard decisions would have to be made. So there was an obvious link there to the resources, and I said in an interview at the time that they were terrified at the anticipated tsunami of patients, which they were. They were watching things going on in other countries. So it's my personal belief that my mum was denied a chance at survival. The DNA CPR, sorry.
No, I was just going to ask you about your mum's deterioration, and I thought that you were going to go on to deal with that.
I'll just finish the explanation of the DNA
sorry,
CPR.
of course.
No, it's my fault. The DNA CPR has room for 3 signatures on it, and only one consultant signed it. There were supposed to be 3 different people involved in the assessment, and I don't consider it valid because one was the consultant I had removed from my mum's care. Another was the anaesthetist who didn't actually go and examine my mum. He didn't see her, and I think there was supposed to be an actual examination. He took the word of the consultant I had removed from my mum's care. And I would like to point out as well that anaesthetist described my mum as an indefensible risk to staff with CPR. I have said that to a nurse in the hospital, and she was absolutely appalled. She actually finished my sentence when I said if they weren't prepared to try, they should have. And she said, let you. And I said yes. But of course, I couldn't get access to the hospital, so I didn't know what was going on. Her deterioration. She was treated. First of all, to get to that, the testing was done at the time, and it was chaos. She had the test taken in A&E. I got different excuses for the delay, that one machine in Antrim, I think, had broken down, and samples were sent to Belfast, that they needed a certain number of samples for a test to be run. And during that time, she was treated by staff not wearing PPE because they were told that it was believed she had only flu. I have undeniable evidence of that. The hospital still tried to deny it, but it happened. So it is conceivable that my mum was infected in the hospital. But she had a period of improvement and then deteriorated again. And if the infection did happen, because there are 3 possible sources, she had domiciliary carers, different pairs at different times of the day, coming from one house, going to her, going on to another, a huge source of infection. but there were also some reckless family members, and there was the PPE incident. So those are the three possible sources. If she was infected before going into hospital, then the daytime, because they were all worried about, was approaching that weekend. The consultant, even though I have issues with her, I do believe she worked hard to try to get my mum stable before she went on leave for the weekend. It was the Easter weekend.
Yes.
On Good Friday, she went on leave. I was terrified because I knew what the hospital was like. It's pretty much a training hospital. You don't see any doctors during the weekend. It's junior doctors if you're lucky. The staff is reduced. The general feeling amongst patients is that you try to survive from a Friday afternoon until a Monday morning. And I knew that this is the worst time for my mum, and the staff is not going to be adequate in there. It got to the Saturday the 11th, and I spoke to my mum on the phone on that afternoon, and it was the last time I spoke to her. There are certain things I've never told anybody about what happened to my mum, and that's one I never will. But it devours me every single day.
And was one of the results of you not being told in time of her fatal deterioration, as it turned out, that you didn't have chance to go and see her and say goodbye?
No, well, first of all, I wasn't allowed in the hospital. I was told that I wouldn't have access to the hospital. That was the Saturday afternoon that I'd spoken to her. I knew that it was day 10. I was terrified. I left it. I said to her that it was getting too difficult for her to speak. I sent her some texts, and I just hoped and prayed that she would be okay. And I went to bed. I wasn't sleeping, but the next morning, the Sunday morning, I phoned the hospital about 8 o'clock, and I was told that she had had a great night. They hadn't had to turn the machine up. She had no temperature, and they were trying to get breakfast in her. And I was ecstatic. I started sending her texts saying, "Mum, you've got past day 10. I'll owe you soon." And I got a call back about 9 o'clock to say that she had a sudden deterioration, and that it wouldn't be days or weeks, it would be hours or minutes. And I got a call back a few minutes later to say that she'd passed away. I then found out later that she'd actually suffered a serious deterioration overnight, and I was her nominated next of first contact and her requested first next of kin, and no one got in touch that night to tell me. They didn't get in touch. They gave me that false report an hour before she died. There had been friction with staff in the hospital in 2019 over the failed discharge. I don't know if that played a part, but they certainly kept me away from her. They apologised in the end up for not telling me about the overnight deterioration, but they never ever looked into it. They never reprimanded anybody. They never provided any sort of explanation for it.
Well, can I ask you, please, about subsequent lack of information as well? Because I know that following your mother's death, you have sought answers to questions about her care in hospital in those final days. And you have also not received the answers that you wanted. I know that you have made those requests of the coroner and also, I think, for the Ombudsman. What was the question that you invited them to answer and which, in your view, Dr. Grundle, remains unanswered?
Well, at the end of both processes, I put reasonable questions to them, which they just stonewall you, and that's a major part of the problem for us. One thing was the hospital claimed that my mum was in a fit state for a DNA CPR conversation.
Yes.
That's fine because she was adamant that she wanted treatment. It was in her care plan before that. Her hospital notes detail how determined she was. But they also listed her symptoms at the time as sleepy, temperature, and intermittent confusion. And I said to them, how could someone be in a fit state for a DNA CPR conversation when those are the symptoms? And they refused to answer. This is a major problem for all of us in trying to get answers. There are issues on all levels for me in my mum's care, from individual staff members through hospital trust, the local health authorities, local government up to Westminster. And there needs to be accountability and justice on all those levels. And we have no avenue to get answers and information. There, I read one other member talking about worrying about the decomposition of the body. And those are questions we're asking ourselves, and they shouldn't be questions that are in our heads. But we're trying to find out what actually happened. There was no scrutiny. The serious adverse investigations, incident investigations were suspended at the time. I was directed to the hospital complaint process. They wasted a few months on that. Their evasive tactics were just appalling. They eventually offered an independent review with someone in respiratory in Northern Ireland, basically a colleague. So I went to the Ombudsman.
Yes.
2 years, in my opinion, were wasted on that.
And still no answers.
Still no answers.
And what's the impact, Dr. Grundle, of repeatedly asking the same question of different organisations and still not getting an answer? How does that affect you?
Well, I can't actually grieve in a way. I really haven't started to grieve, but much of this impact is about the prolonged grief.
Yes.
If we can't even get information to accept what has happened, to understand, there's no possibility of starting to grieve. And this is happening not just to us. You see this with Hillsborough as well. You know, the families the pain is prolonged. We are dragged down this path, and it is through self-preservation for others.
Yeah.
And that's why an awful lot of the work at the minute on the duty of candour for the Hillsborough and things is so important. The Hillsborough law. We need to have access to this information, and then maybe we can. I'm never going to have closure or peace about what happened to my mum, but I at least need that information to know what happened.
Yes.
And then to be able to go on and get some accountability. Well, the answers, the truth, accountability, and justice for my mum, and that's what we want.
Yes, and I know that you set out in your witness statement that that's what everybody connected to your group wants. And in terms of recommendations, at paragraph 234, you say, our group will make recommendations for the future in our submissions to the inquiry. There is, however, one thing we do consider to be of overriding importance, and that is that there is a need to make sure that any recommendations from the inquiry are in fact implemented.
Yes, and I note that a lot of people draw comparisons with a natural disaster. I used tsunami at 2020 myself.
Yes.
I'd heard it, and people say about an earthquake and things. There's a lot of focus on the future, and we are all concerned. None of us wants this to happen to anyone else ever again. But if this was an earthquake, you cannot build a future on the site of an earthquake. The past and the present need to be sorted first before that can happen. Our loved ones weren't simply sacrifices to create a better future for those fortunate enough to have survived the pandemic. They were real people, and we need to get justice for them. And that can only happen if we are allowed to get inquests and DNA CPR reviews. And I know there are politicians who are apparently supporting this. I spoke to Gregory Campbell recently, local, who has voiced his support for that, and also a local inquiry. But we need to guarantee a future. We need to deal with the past, first of all. And that future, at the minute, is not going to happen because there are people who, there's no deterrent. There are people who will feel free and be free to act in the exact same way. And what has happened during the pandemic will happen again. This is something that will guarantee the future that we all want by helping us to get that justice for our loved ones.
Thank you, Dr. Grundle. My lady, those are all of my questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Grundle. A number of points you've made have been very important ones, obviously. As far as wakes are concerned, you don't have to persuade me about the importance of wakes. I came from, my mother was a Cockney, and they had wakes, and they laughed, they cried, they told stories, and as you say, probably had something stronger than soup to drink. But they said goodbye. So I do understand how important.
Yeah, that's the importance of it.
Yeah, it is. It's saying goodbye properly, and I appreciate that. That's really what is probably fueling your prolonged grief, is the sense that your mother you weren't with her, and you didn't get the chance to say goodbye.
Yeah, that separation, particularly at the end, when I know the circumstances and how she suffered on her own, and she died with a nurse and a trainee nurse with her, and I often ask myself if she thought that she had been abandoned when she needed me the most, and the fact that if something I haven't told anyone was when I got her phone back, I found a draft of a text on it that she'd tried to send me, and I actually accidentally sent it to myself the day after when I was looking through the phone. I had to go through the phone again recently to find some information, and it wasn't, she hadn't been able to write it properly. I don't know why I didn't understand at the time, because it wasn't exactly code breaking, but I realised what she'd been trying to say to me, and she didn't manage to send a message. And if I got that message, there's not a force in this world that would have stopped me from getting into that ward. I didn't get it. And that's the separation, that's the damage caused. And some of us, I mentioned an earthquake. There's an aftermath. To hopefully not taking that analogy or that theme too far, many of us are trapped in the rubble of that. Some of us, and I include myself in that, won't come out of it. But there are barriers and obstacles and rubble that can be removed to allow us to get inquests and investigations and those reviews. And the coroner service is another service that is in need of overhaul. It has it needs funding, and I think they're frightened of the floodgates being open to COVID inquests by not giving what we need. I'm conscious that I've taken up far too much of your
No,
time.
you have not, Dr.
If I
Rundle.
could say-
I do understand, and I very much hope that you will, and others like you, will come out of the rubble sometime. So thank you very much indeed for the help that you've given.
Could I just say thank you to a couple of people before I
may.
go? First of all, thank you to you and the inquiry. This is something that I've been trying to do for 6 years to get this information out in the right environment, and the inquiry is the right environment. And also, I have seen the worst of humanity over the last few years. I ended up, there was a point I had nowhere to go, and I found the UK group, and they put me onto the local group, and Brodie Jackson Cantor and P.A. Duffy, and those people, Pete and Nicola and Claire and Peter and especially and everybody, those solicitors, everyone from the paralegals and caseworkers right up, have been absolutely outstanding to me. They are exceptions. They are exceptional individuals, professionally excellent, and just genuine, caring human beings. It is more than work to them, and from the bottom of my heart, I thank them.
Thank you very much indeed. Several of them are here, Dr. Grundle, and I can see them looking very moved, if I may say so. So thank you very much for those kind words. We shall break now, I think.
Yes,
Blackwell?
certainly.
And I shall return at 25 to
10 to 3?
10 to, sorry.
I don't know if you can see the clock from there, my lady.
10 to 3.
Yes,
Thank
thank you.
Ms. Blackwell.
My lady, the next witness is Mrs. Marie McArdle. May she be sworn, please?
Could you repeat after me? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Sorry if we kept you waiting all day.
No, it's okay.
Will you begin by giving us your full name, please?
My name is Marie McArdle.
Thank you very much. Mrs. McArdle, I know that you've got before you a witness statement which you've provided to this inquiry. It's IMQ 000659979. And you have also subsequently provided a second statement which sets out the evidence and sentiments of your brother, Roddy McIver. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And for the record, that's at INQ 000660155. Mrs. McArdle, you're attending the inquiry today to tell us about your mother, Anne McIver, and about your experience with her and her death and what followed thereafter. Your mother was born on the 1st of September of 1939, and she passed away on the 20th of May of 2020. Is that right?
That's right.
You describe her in your witness statement as a strong person and a very private, independent lady. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Your father had passed away on the 10th of June of 2008, and since that time, your mother was on her own, but you are a very close family, you describe, of 4 siblings.
Yeah.
And I know that you're accompanied today to the inquiry by your sister Una. You say that you all took it in turns to look after your mum once your dad had passed away, and she became frail and she had poor mobility. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
You paid for her care, and she had a package where carers would come in 4 times a day. and they would assist her with getting washed and dressed, but mentally she was very good.
Yeah, yeah.
You also took responsibility for your mum's care. You would organise the care packages and you would organise her food and her medication, and you had a rota amongst the siblings of looking after her, didn't you? You worked part-time as a social worker up to 2016 when you gave up work, and then your role was really looking after your mum.
Yeah.
You loved to shop, and so did your mum, and you would often go out together. Is that right?
That's right.
She had 11 grandchildren, and they would often go round and see her, and there was a lot of contact between your mum and her grandchildren. When lockdown happened, your brother Tom, who lived with her from time to time, his role as a coach tour driver stopped, so he was with her more of the time than not. Is that right?
Yes.
The care package that was in place was then reduced
Yes.
from 4 times a day to once a day.
Yes.
Is that right? So what happened with the rest of your mum's care?
Well, Tom really took over the role. I mean, Mum was mobile and she was able to get about with a frame.
Yes.
Which was more for safety than anything else in case she'd fall over. She was able to make a cup of tea and she was able to use the bathroom. So she was mobile and, but frail, but able to get about. So we decided just to cut down the care package to once a day to try and protect her, that there were less people coming into the house.
Right.
Yeah.
On the 24th of April 2020, did carers come round to your mum's house and did they say that they were concerned about a swelling on her leg?
Yeah, so there's a considerable distance between where I live and where my mother lived. So it was like about an hour and 15 minutes drive, okay? So they called me and told me there was a swelling on Mum's leg that they were concerned about, and she was a bit breathless. Now, when Mum got anxious, she would be breathless, so,
Yes.
they just weren't sure. So we made contact with the GP. In normal circumstances, they would have came out and had a look at Mum, examined Mum. But because of COVID, they refused to come out. So they said with the swelling on the leg, it could be a clot or heart failure, and it was best that she was seen at a hospital. So,
How did your mum feel about going to hospital?
she was very frightened about going to hospital. She was very frightened about the whole COVID scenario.
Yes.
And I had never seen my mother afraid of anything in her life. She was a formidable character, very strong character. And I didn't actually see her that morning because we weren't obviously allowed to travel between
Yes.
the two distances. But my brother was there, and he said that she had a lot of fear in her. He'll never forget the fear in her eyes. So whenever we told her the ambulance, I told her the ambulance was coming to take her, and that not to be frightened, that they'd be wearing their hazmat suits and they'd be protected. And her response was, "They better be. I don't want to catch anything from them." So
Yes.
that was her
And-
attitude.
Thank you. And you mentioned your brother. Is that Roddy who was
Yes,
there?
that's Rod.
And I will read into the record some of his reflections at the end of your evidence, if I may.
Thank you.
You were not able to go to hospital with her,
No, none of us were allowed
No.
to go. Yeah.
and then you called the hospital later on that day to find out what was happening with her care, didn't you?
Yes.
What were you told?
Well, it was the start of a nightmare, basically. Each time you rang, you got a different story. Mum had numerous movements from one unit, from one bed to another bed during those first 24 hours. And basically, they admitted her then.
Right. And were you able to speak to her?
Not to my recollection, no.
Right. Did you understand what was going on and when she was going to be discharged?
No, there was no sort of the communication was one of my the major issues I have with what happened during the COVID. You just were it was guesswork, and one person would tell you something else, and the next person would tell you the opposite, and it was just guesswork. It was a complete nightmare, and then I was trying to relay this to my siblings. you know, so that they would know. But, you know, initially we felt that Mummy was going in for them to sort of say maybe it was fluid and give her water tablets, or we had no idea at that stage for the length of time she was going to be there, or that she would lose her life while she was there. It never entered our heads at that stage.
In fact, she was there from the 24th of April until the 13th of May, when she was discharged to a care home. Is that right?
That's right.
But then she was back in hospital by the 15th of May.
Yes. During that period from
Yes.
the 24th to the 13th, when we would call the hospital, you know, I kept hearing that she's sleeping, that she refused physiotherapy, that she was sleepy. My mum never slept. She was walking night and day. If we were staying at night, you didn't get sleep because Mum was up and down and you were obviously afraid of her falling. So I do believe Mummy had COVID before she was discharged. On the morning that she was due to be discharged to the home, she had a COVID test.
So that was the 13th of May?
Yes, that was on the 13th of May. And I spoke to one nurse who said there was discrepancy over the test and they weren't sure if she was going to be discharged or not.
Yes.
And to leave it a couple of hours and call back. So I called back in a couple of hours and was spoken to by a senior person who said, no, that Mum's test was positive. She doesn't know what the other nurse was referring to, and that of course she would be going to the home. But I believe Mummy had COVID when she was discharged to that home.
Right. Throughout the period of time that we're talking about, and up until the 13th of May, were you able to go to the hospital and visit your mum?
No, we were never allowed near the hospital, no.
Did you see her at all on a video call?
There were a couple of video calls. Now, I mean, it's hard to describe. I was constantly on the phone, trying to get updates, trying to find out what was happening with her care, what her condition was, what her treatment was she eating, was she sleeping? You know, it was constantly trying. On a couple of occasions when I rang, they would start to read me out Mum's notes, and then I would realise this doesn't sound like Mum, and then they'd say, oh, they're the notes of another person, they're not your mum, so we'll hold on a wee minute, do we get someone else? So it was so difficult to get information. And sorry, I've lost my...
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I was asking you about video calls and whether you were able to see her.
So I think on 2 occasions I had a video call before she was discharged. And it was very foggy, the picture.
Yes.
And very hard to see Mummy and very hard to make out what she was saying. Right. And I found it very frustrating. Yeah. I'm sure it was frustrating for Mummy too, do you know?
Yes. I think one of your brothers at least, or perhaps both of your brothers, were allowed up to the hospital to have what's described as a window visit.
No, not what actually happened was they would have been travelling up and down with clothes to the hospital, you know, with changes of clothes and things.
Yes.
And on one occasion, there wasn't really a system where you could arrange that, but one of my brothers did go round the hospital on a ground floor, but no, there was no arranged contact, and plus we weren't allowed to travel to the hospital. The hospital's 30 minutes away from our home, so
that
they
was
only
against
went
the
when
rules.
they had to bring clothes like night dresses and things like that.
So she was discharged into the care home. She went back into hospital on the 15th of May.
Yes.
And did you get a phone call to say that her SAT readings weren't good?
Yes. So Mum was discharged on that 13th night, okay? And I got a phone call and I was delighted because I could hear her, and I was chatting away to her for the first time, really. I hadn't really got talking to her like that in the hospital. And she said, Marie, will you get off the phone? I'm seeing Coronation Street for the first time in 3 weeks or whatever it was. And she sounded happy enough to be out of the hospital and near her home. She would have known some of the staff. She would have known, they were in isolation, obviously.
Yes.
But she was at home area, if you know what I mean. It was only 4 miles from where she lived. But the staff were saying now that they were quite annoyed with her appearance when she came from the hospital, you know, with she was quite dishevelled. Her hair she didn't look like she had been looked after really that well. And I was, you know, these were sort of things where when you're going in and out of hospital outside of COVID that I would have taken care of, you know. And but anyway, so that was on the Thursday. Friday morning, I got a call from the home to say that her SATs, and that if the family wanted to come up to see her, they were going to call for an ambulance. So I called all my siblings and told them that you can go up to the home. You'll see Mummy being transferred out of the home and into an ambulance.
Yes.
So at least you would have a sight of her. We all started to make our way. I was an hour and 15 minutes away. My sister was an hour away, you know. And we started to make our way up there. Then I got a phone call as I arrived there to say, I got a phone call a wee bit earlier than that just to say that the doctor was going to prescribe another antibiotic and not, you needn't bother coming up because she wouldn't be going. And I said, well, I'm halfway there and I'll just continue on, because obviously it was over 3 weeks at this stage and I hadn't seen Mummy. And I thought maybe I'll walk round and see if I can peep in the window. However, when I arrived at the car park, the phone rang again. It was home to say that she'd crashed and that the ambulance would be there in 3 minutes. So we were all in the car park, socially distanced from each other. The ambulance arrived and Mummy was wheeled out of the home. And when she saw me, she said, a lot of good you're praying it's doing for me. She said, Mummy was a woman of great faith, and as our family is. And she saw my 2 brothers, and she broke down when she saw my sister Una, who's here, because Una's the youngest and the baby. Yeah. So
she saw you all there.
Yeah. And I've nightmares of why did I not hug her then? That was the last time I saw her. Why I didn't approach her and hug her? Why didn't we just, do what so many were doing and forget about the rules and just hug her? I mean, we weren't even able to hug each other. Never mind Mum, so. Yeah.
So she was then taken back to the hospital.
She was taken back to the hospital, and this experience, the second admission to the hospital, was completely different. We had more. The doctor would rang me that evening. The nurse rang me that evening. The doctor rang me next morning. There was a lot more communication and a lot more, could I say, a professional approach to how really I thought Mummy should have been treated prior to the first discharge.
Yes. On the 20th of May, did you have a final video call with your mum? And that was organised through the hospital just before she died?
Yes. Well, prior to this, when the doctor rang me, he said, we're going to fight very hard for your mum. And even though she had tested positive, we still didn't think she was going to die, because she was a very, very strong woman, But anyway, on the morning they rang me, it was maybe around 11, and they said that she wasn't going to make it, and that I presume it was morphine or I don't know, whatever it was going to, but she would be unconscious, and that if we wanted to speak to her, they'd arrange the video call. So I rang round my siblings, and it was arranged that Una would go first, and then Roddy, and then myself. The quality of that, there was someone there holding the camera. Mummy really she had her eyes closed throughout the call. She couldn't really speak. Completely different than the call I'd had the previous Thursday, as I say, in the home, And, she was trying to speak but couldn't speak. And, again, you wonder what was it she was trying to say. And, I mean, those are the things that you dwell upon,
Yes. And I think after that video call had ended, the 4 of you had a video call together. Is that right? The 4 siblings?
Yes.
And you were praying together?
Yes, well, that was, I sort of kept in contact with the hospital during the day, and it was later on that day then, when they didn't think that she had much time left, we said, there's a prayer that we can say when people are dying, the Divine Mercy Prayer. So we were saying it in each of our 4 homes. And we had just finished when I got the phone call to say that she had passed, maybe about 10 minutes later, to say that Mummy passed. So I do believe our Lord was with her then, but I wasn't there. and my sister and my 2 brothers.
I want to ask you about administrative processes, please,
Yes.
after your mum had passed away. You tell us that you weren't able to dress her for the coffin, that your mum was always in a coat, and she
Yeah.
loved her coat, and you asked if you sent it down, if they would put it in on top of her in the
yeah, in
coffin.
the coffin.
And you hope that happened, but you don't know for certain whether it did. And you then describe as an awful confusion the arrangements for the funeral.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What was confusing about them?
Well, like the time my mum was in the hospital, I seemed to spend my whole time on the telephone, you know. And my 2 brothers went socially distant to meet the undertaker. And I actually spoke to the undertaker prior to coming over here, and he said anything that was left down was put in the coffin. So I am assured that has happened. But we were the whole time, where would Mummy, what was the process? What was to happen? Where would she be buried? You know, our own priest, our mum's own priest, at that stage was not allowing people into the chapel. So the chapel, it was not possible for her, the coffin, to be taken into the
Yes.
chapel. So the funeral home agreed that she would be in the funeral home, and they had a large television. And so the priest stood in the chapel 4 miles away alone and said the funeral mass, the requiem mass, while we sat socially distant in a funeral home watching him deliver the mass on TV. So that is how it happened. And as I say, we were socially distant. We couldn't hug each other, hold each other's hands. The coffin was there in front, and I remember sitting there looking at that coffin, going, "Is Mummy in there?" Where, you know, like 4 weeks prior to this, Mum and I had been at Marks and Spencer's shopping, coffee, scone, and now she disappeared. She's gone, completely disappeared. It's just, where was she? You know, is she really in there? We hadn't seen her. You know, to think that, I mean, she was always so particular about her appearance, that she was in body bags in there, allegedly. It was just so difficult, you know, and so painful and traumatic.
And you weren't able to hold a wake for her?
No wake. And like I'd said in my statement, it was so different from Daddy. Daddy had died in 2008, and like his wake was like a celebration. Dad was a big character. He was a total extrovert, and Mum was a total introvert. And you know, all his old friends came, family came. We were there. The stories, the crack, the soup. You know, it was just a completely different experience, a loving experience. And I look back, and I remember Daddy fondly, warmly. With Mum, I can't bear to think about it. It's horrific. No wake. I mean, we weren't with her when we weren't with her when she died. She was on her own without her family, and family was everything to Mummy. Mummy didn't have a social life. She didn't, you know, her social life was going out for a scone or something. She didn't go out with other friends or anything. It was just family with Mum. And I think that is why it would have been most important for her to have a wake. Plus, she had brothers alive, and her sister, who lives in Toronto in Canada, who called her every day, who came home for 2 to 3 months every summer and stayed with Mum. And those are the things that were important to her. And those, you know, like I was speaking to my aunt before I came over here. She's 90. She is totally compos mentis, fit, a great woman, and she misses Mum so much. It's just a large part of her life that's gone.
I'd like to touch on some personal impact with you, if I might do so, Mrs. McArdle. You say that the pandemic has had a terrible impact on your well-being, including both your physical and your mental health. Mm-hmm. You describe yourself as having been depressed and taking antidepressants because of the impact of losing your mum in the way that you did. And you also say this, I wish to say one thing in particular that's very important to me. I was very close with my mother, but my mother and I had unresolved issues. I worked very hard during her life to resolve them, but I always believed I would have the chance to say what I needed to before she passed away. The pandemic robbed me of that chance.
That's right. I'm the eldest, as I say, and my brother refers to me as the sheriff. And I took on this role of, as I say, looking after mum's complete care, and you know, I would always arrange the social galas, not with all of the rest of them. But I did that to prove my worth to my mother. There are other issues which I'm not going to go into here today, but you know, and I tried all my life very hard to do that. And I know she loved me and I loved her, you know, just that's the way it was. But I always wanted to have that conversation about the things that were not right between us. And as I say, at no time did we think Mum was going to die, and it didn't happen. And it's, I mean, and the guilt of not seeing her in the hospital. I took the phone call from the GP at the very first, from the carers, the very first on the 24th of April. And it was me that agreed that she should go to hospital.
Yes.
Didn't see her, wasn't with her. You know, I just feel so much that I let her down. And like you say, I didn't get to have that conversation that I always felt that her and I could have.
Yes. And Mrs. McCardle, in the moments that remain, I would just like to read into the record some of the reflections from your brother, Roddy McIver, that you've very kindly provided in your additional witness statement.
Okay.
He says, my mother became unwell at home. Despite efforts, a GP did not attend to assess her, and she was admitted to hospital. I clearly remember the fear in my mother's eyes as she left her home. She didn't want to go to hospital. She was frightened. However, she believed it was her best chance of recovery. The image of her leaving her home in distress remains fixed in my memory. I continue to question whether earlier medical assessment in the community might have altered the course of events, and should we have pushed harder for this with the GP. He goes on to say, the last time I saw my mother alive was through a video call facilitated by hospital staff. My wife and I sat together at home as we tried to communicate with Mum through a very unclear iPad connection. Later that same evening, we were informed that her condition had deteriorated significantly. She passed away without any of her children present. He then talks about the nursing home. Passing the nursing home near my home triggers distressing recollections. I think about Mother every day. There remains a persistent sense of guilt within, a feeling that we failed her, despite knowing intellectually that the restrictions were beyond our control. The inability to provide comfort in her final days has left a deep psychological wound. This has had a detrimental effect on my mental health and overall well-being.
Yeah.
Mrs. McCardle, thank you very much. Is there
can
something else
yes,
that you would like to say?
Can I just say that the support, you know, there's been no support for us. I am a member of the Northern Ireland Bereaved Group, as you know.
Yes.
And we have it support through each other. And although this will be obviously the end of the modules, we hope to see the recommendations that Our Lady will hopefully recommend seen through. And on that then, my mother died the night that Boris Johnson was partying on Downing Street. You know, Michelle O'Neill had a funeral a couple of weeks after Mummy, or allowed for a funeral to be held a couple of weeks after Mummy had died, but we weren't allowed any of that. So I think there's a big emphasis on our politicians to listen to the recommendations. Michelle O'Neill apologised. I accept that apology, but it's how she will work towards implementing the recommendations that are made. And like one of them is like a care partner, so that if anyone ever goes into hospital, there's a partner there with them, a person who will accompany them. Things like that. That's where we want the apologies of the politicians to be seen. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Colonel. And I will need your help and the help of people like you to get the recommendations implemented, because it's going to take pressure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for giving evidence. I think we may have given a whole new meaning to the word soup, have we?
I think so.
Anyway, thank you so much. It can't have been
Okay.
easy for you. I'm delighted you've got your sister with you.
Okay.
And I'm sure that all your siblings would have said much the same as you and your brother did about the impact on you.
Yes, well, I'm sure you're getting the same things coming from
and
us
I have
all.
since the very first time
Yeah.
I met the bereaved. It's extraordinary
Yeah.
just how many stories are so similar. I mean,
Yeah.
different aspects, obviously.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
Thank you, and safe journey back to Northern Ireland.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.
My lady, I think we're ready to go straight on to the
Thank
final
you.
witness of the day, Julia McMurray. Thank you.
Ms. Casamali. No, we really have kept you waiting till the end, I'm sorry.
That's okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Please can the witness be sworn?
I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but
and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Thank you.
Ms McMurray, thank you so much for attending the inquiry today. You've already provided a witness statement to this module,
Yes.
and that's dated the 22nd of December 2025. It should be in front of you. And just for the record, the reference number is INQ 000659980. Ms McMurray, you're attending today to tell the inquiry about the experience of losing your husband, Robert, during the
Yes.
pandemic. He passed away on the 30th of January 2021 in hospital after contracting COVID-19, and he was 64 at the time of his death.
That's right.
I'd like to start by asking you a few questions about Robert as you knew him during his life. You met Robert when he was 16, and you have 2 children together, isn't that right?
That's right, yes.
Are you able to tell me their names?
Lindsay and Robin, yes.
Are you able to tell me a little bit about his personality? How was he as a husband and as a father?
Yeah, well, Robert, I met, as I say, I was very young, just 16. He worked in the bank in our local town, and he was immensely popular there. We actually met when I was playing football, and he was the referee. So,
Okay.
but he had a very successful career. He was particularly keen on banking with the farming community. And in fact, that became his large part of the biggest part of his career, working with farmers, and he worked with agricultural advisors. And before he retired, he worked directly with the Northern Ireland Regional Director. So, very successful career, and very strong character. He was strong in his career. He was strong with the family. Nothing was ever going to go wrong. You know, Robert just said it'll be okay. You know, everything would be okay with him. He was steadfast.
You say he was reassuring, he was strong, considerate, and he actually volunteered.
Yes, he did volunteer. Actually, we both became youth leaders in the town at that time when we were very young. And he later went on to do other volunteering, and mostly, if you ever work in the bank, everybody will look for you to be the treasurer, you know.
Ms McMurray, he actually had another diagnosis a few years before he passed away. Are you able to tell me about that, please?
Yes, in December, well, just before December 2020, Robert was diagnosed with a cancerous tumour on his bowel, so that meant he had to go into hospital to have that removed. He went into hospital on the 29th of December. Prior to that, the rules at the time were that I was able to visit but we would both have to be tested for COVID, and we would have to isolate for a period first. So my son moved out. He slept on a camp bed at his sister's house, and we were very careful to keep all the rules and to ensure that we isolated as we were required to do. Robert went into hospital. He was in a side ward in the first ward he was in, and he was well cared for in that ward. He had his operation, and that was a success. So the cancerous tumour was removed. However, I should have said that when he was in his 50s, Robert had been diagnosed with dementia. And although that was a horrible diagnosis, he dealt with it with his usual strength. And, you know, he said, it is what it is. And I promised that I would look after him in that respect. So his strength remained and his good humour remained. He was always very humorous. In fact, we had an appointment with a consultant at one stage who wanted to speak to me separately, spoke to Robert first and then spoke to me, I assume, to see if we were both saying how he was on the same page. And whenever I came out, Robert said to the consultant, well, how did she do?
So just to check, this is before he went into hospital in
That
2020?
was he was in his 50s when he had his dementia diagnosis. So when he went into hospital, we knew that would be a huge challenge. At home, before his hospital admission, Robert was still, I was still working full time, so he was safe at home and very happy at home. He was able to walk around the block with the dog. He chatted to neighbours. He was still a key holder for people when they went on holiday. So he was leading a reasonably normal life and was very, very happy.
And he went into hospital then in December 2020, on the 29th of December, you say, for his surgery.
That's right.
You said the surgery was successful, but what was the experience like for him in terms of being in hospital with dementia?
Well, initially, I was able to be there and every day, and I was able to comfort him. At times, the staff phoned me to say, he's a bit unsettled, could you come? You know, if times when I wasn't there. I was able really to be helpful and keep him settled. However, as time went on, he just became more and more confused. That had been the pattern. Although he was very happy at home before he went to hospital, if you'd taken him out of familiar surroundings, he became confused and insecure. So that escalated when he went into hospital, and my presence was important.
And he was initially in the elective surgery ward, wasn't he? So that was the
right,
post-operative ward. And you say in your statement that ward was on the green pathway. Are you able to tell me what the green pathway was?
The green pathway was the term used for the areas that were most protected, that there were very few people in and out of, and that anybody who was in had been tested, and there were no more admissions at that stage. Admissions to hospital had stopped, and in fact, when we got to the 9th of January, Robert was the only remaining patient, appropriately in a side ward, being cared for, but his recovery was quite slow.
Mm-hmm. And then he actually moved, I should clarify, tested for COVID. Yes. So if a ward is on the green pathway, it means that
you're tested for COVID,
COVID negative
before you're allowed into it, and it was the green pathway was really spick and span. There were fewer risks there than anywhere else in the hospital.
And you say he was there until the 9th of January.
He actually was there until the 10th. He was the last patient there, and suddenly at 7:30 in the evening, a nurse approached me and said, the ward's closing, Robert has to be moved. you'll just have to go. And I asked her to please reconsider, because I had seen how insecure he had become in hospital, and I knew it would upset him to be moved again. So I ran behind the bed, being pushed around all of these corridors. And I had an awful feeling about it, which came to pass, because that was the beginning of the nightmare for him. He was put into a ward which I'd only just recently been told by the hospital was an amber ward, which meant there was a risk of COVID. Yeah. He was put into a very noisy ward. The patient opposite him was very disruptive, and Robert, and his notes constantly say that he was expected to have one-to-one care, which he never had until the end.
And then after he was moved to that amber ward, he was in fact moved a further 3 times, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Are you able to tell the inquiry why he was moved?
Well, it was chaotic. At times I was told because there was COVID on the ward, so they were moving the healthy patients out, and at times I was told that the healthy patients were staying in the COVID, so I never actually really knew. And sadly, on the 14th of January then, that was the last time I got to speak to Robert face to face.
And if we could focus on that date for a moment. So, well, in fact, the day before, on the 13th of January, you received a notification, or rather you were told by the hospital that he may be discharged. Is that right?
I was told by the hospital that they were looking for a care package for him. His operation had resulted in a stoma. Mm-hmm. I had no experience of how to deal with that, and Robert couldn't deal with it. Apparently there were stoma clinics that in normal times had run to help people with that when on discharge, but those had all been suspended. So the hospital was looking for a care package for him. Then on the 14th of January, visiting was suspended, and I couldn't believe that I wasn't allowed in to him. He wasn't. He was terrified. You know, he didn't want to be left. For the next period, we had video calls. Sorry, did I interrupt?
No, not at all. I was about to rudely interrupt you. Please carry on.
For the next period, we had video calls when we could have them, but as a dementia patient, unlike other people, Robert had lost the ability to text or to phone us.
He needed help, didn't he, in terms of setting up those video calls?
Yeah, he needed help, and the hospital did try to provide that, but it wasn't consistent, and it was haphazard.
So the last time that you were able to visit him was on the 14th of January?
That was the 14th of January, yes.
And then lockdown is announced on the 14th of January?
Yeah, so I just wasn't allowed in anymore. When I saw Robert on the calls, he was distraught. Confusion had really escalated by that stage. He told me that he would rather be dead, which was completely out of character, even after his dementia diagnosis. He asked why we'd left him. The family had left him. Yes. By that stage, Lindsay and Robin had moved back into my bubble, so we were watching him on a video call. He thought that he must have done something wrong.
And you say in your statement that he would plead to be allowed to come home at that point over the video calls.
He thought he was going to be getting home, but in the event, the hospital couldn't get a care package for him because they went to the memory services team, who wouldn't accept him because he was under 65. apparently.
Yes.
They referred his case to the physical disability team who had it over the weekend, and they wouldn't accept him because they don't deal with dementia patients. It went back to the memory team who sourced a package on the 20th of January.
And I understand the intention was that he would be discharged on the 20th.
That's right.
But then on the 19th of January, he contracted COVID, didn't he?
He was diagnosed with COVID.
So he remained in hospital then.
He was too unwell.
I'd like to move us a few days forward, please, if that's okay. You describe a fall that Robert suffered in hospital on the 23rd of January. So at this point, he's already contracted COVID.
Yes.
You're still communicating with him solely by way of video call, as I understand it.
Solely by way of video calls, and it was very difficult to get through to the hospital to find out how he was, ever.
And how did you learn about the fall on the 23rd of January?
I got a telephone call on the evening of the 23rd of January to say that Robert had fallen. He apparently had been checked over, and I was told that he was physically okay. After the call, I was obviously very worried about him, and I rang and I rang and I rang all night, and nobody picked up. And I was in desperation. I considered ringing the police, and then I thought, my rational side said, well, what are they going to do, you know? Anyway, the next morning I finally found out that he'd been moved to another ward.
And that ward was the respiratory ward, wasn't it?
At that stage, yes. And I mean, his notes later showed that he had, at that stage, he was visibly hyperventilating and exacerbation of COVID and anxiety.
And how?
He may have been physically okay, but I really believe that that fall affected his mental health, and his notes show that he hadn't been seen for some time before he was found on the floor.
You didn't actually find out about him moving to the ward at the time, did you?
No, not until the next day.
And it was one of Robert's doctors who contacted you when he was in the ward. So one of the doctors contacted you to tell you that he had been moved to the ward and then to provide you with some updates.
Yes,
thereafter.
I did get some updates at that stage. However, it was after that and a few days before Robert died that a doctor phoned me and said, I've examined your husband. He's not a candidate for ventilation.
And that was one of the doctors on the respiratory ward, wasn't it?
That was one of the doctors on the respiratory ward.
And are you able to tell the inquiry, please, what you said in response to that?
I said to him that I want everything possible done for my husband. And I asked why he wouldn't be ventilated. The reason I was given was that he had dementia and that the level of anaesthesia required for ventilation wouldn't sit with him. Now, I have to say, you know, if that was a reason not to ventilate Robert, if there were fewer routes to recovery for a dementia patient, why didn't they protect him before they moved him out of a green pathway ward? You know, I'll never understand that. So he wasn't ventilated. Then the day before Robert died.
That's the 29th of January, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
You receive a call from the hospital on
Yes.
that date, don't you?
Yes, I received a call from the hospital to say that I could visit.
And that was an
Finally.
end. Apologies.
So I rushed over to the hospital, got gowned and everything, and Robert was unconscious and completely unresponsive.
And this was an end of life visit, wasn't it? So it was the last time that you were able to see him.
This was the last time that I saw him. He wasn't. I know that Robert would have squeezed my hand or responded in some way if he'd been able. But he was completely unresponsive. And I found that visit really futile. You know, why, when he was pleading with us, when he just needed a bit of comfort, were we not allowed in before then? And my son and daughter didn't see Robert from something like the 20th of December. He disappeared to them.
And they joined you on for the end of life visit, didn't they?
Sorry?
Sorry, they joined you on that visit on the 29th of January, didn't they?
Yes, they
were able to.
They didn't get in on the 29th of January. There's just me. Just me. But the notes following the visit say that Robert moaned and lamented for some time. So somewhere, I think he must have known I was there, but he couldn't communicate.
And then Robert sadly passed away the next day on the 30th of January 2021. And you, in fact, contracted COVID yourself the following day on the 31st of January 2021.
Yeah.
Do you know how you contracted COVID?
Well, I'm convinced that I got COVID going in and out of the hospital to collect and leave in his laundry, because that's what you had to do. So I was literally feet away from Robert every day and couldn't go in to see him. That's the only place I was. Actually, where the laundry collection point was right at the exit, so you couldn't have missed. You know, you staff were coming past you on the way out. So I'm convinced that's where I caught COVID. And actually, as far as laundry goes, Robert died on the 30th of January, and I got a call the following August 21 to say that there were some belongings had been found. When I went to get them, they weren't there. So the ward assured me that they'd sent them down, and the people at the laundry collection point couldn't find them.
So those
Never
are
turned up.
Those are items that are now missing. Ms McMurray, I'd like to turn next to Robert's funeral, if I may.
Yeah.
You say, well, his funeral took place a little while after his death. On what date did his funeral take place?
The 11th of February.
And what was the reason for the gap in between?
That was because I had COVID, and thankfully it was delayed, but at the time we weren't allowed to have a wake or a funeral either. And I know there's been evidence already today, but you know, it was devastating that we couldn't have had a wake for Robert. Devastating that Lindsay and Robin couldn't see people and hear stories about him.
And just before we come to the funeral as it happened, and the fact that there wasn't, that it wasn't possible to have a wake, can I ask, please, where Robert's body was kept between his death and the funeral?
Robert's body was kept in a funeral home. He wasn't allowed to be brought home.
And you wanted him to be brought home?
Of course, yeah. In Northern Ireland, and particularly in country areas, that's what you do. It's very important to have the body home. Very important, and for family to get together. And you know, it's the number of times that we say in Northern Ireland, "Oh, I only ever see you at a funeral." Life is busy. That is where you see people. That is where your family and friends come together, and that being missed is horrible. It's just horrible.
And you say, in fact, that was a point that the two of you had discussed during your treatment. So you've said in your statement that it was a promise I had made to him throughout his treatment that I would get him home as he so desperately wished, home where he felt safe and loved. Sadly, I was not even able to give him that after he died.
Yeah, he spent the period when we should have been having a wake at home, he spent that period in a funeral parlour.
I'd like to turn to the experience of the funeral itself, if I may.
Yeah.
So we've heard that it was delayed due to the pandemic and your own COVID diagnosis. I understand that the numbers at the funeral whilst the funeral took place, the numbers were restricted?
At the time, we were allowed 25 people. That included the minister and the undertakers and the singers. I had a husband and wife who were able to sing some songs. The rest of us couldn't sing. That's also very important to me. Anyway, so we had 25 there. I waved at my friends and my family across the church. I wasn't allowed to hug them.
Because there was social distancing within the funeral
Social
itself.
distancing. Actually, I had to make choices. There were some couples that Robert and I were friendly with, and I had to make a choice between whether the husband or the wife could be present. That was incredibly difficult. And they all wanted to be there. Robert was highly respected. They all wanted to be there to mark that.
And in fact, as you've said in your statement, that he was such an upstanding, kind and valuable member of the community, he
Yes.
truly deserved a proper funeral and wake, which would have been, as you say, very well attended.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Ms McMurray, thank you so much for providing your story
Yes.
to the inquiry today. Can I ask if there is anything further that you would like to add?
Really just, I'm shocked. I was shocked at Robert's treatment as a dementia sufferer. You know, 1 in 3 of us will get the disease, and that he wasn't better cared for was absolutely shocking. If COVID ever happens again, you know, it's got to be different. I felt completely powerless. When you promise to look after somebody in sickness and in health, or promise to look after them in the hospital, you don't do that with a caveat that unless somebody decides you're not allowed to do that, you know, you promise. I feel that I failed him. It doesn't matter how many people say you've done your best. You know, you make a promise, you intend to keep it. I'll never forget particular scenes of, in my head, Robert lying on the floor. I will never forget his video calls, you know, feeling he'd done something wrong. For somebody so upright and honest, that was a terrible way to feel. And he was terrified. And I really think nobody should die alone. And I have to say, and I know you've heard it so many times, my lady, but I feel completely betrayed by the authorities breaking the rules whenever I wasn't even allowed to hold Robert's hand when he was terrified and sick and confused. That is just appalling. The only other thing I would like to say is that I'm passionate now about trying to see how things can be done, and I will pursue your recommendations, my lady. I'm with Brenda, who you know.
I do. In
the Northern Ireland Bereaved Group, and Martina, and we will be pursuing those. The group has been a great support, as has PA Duffy and the legal team. Apart from me pursuing that, I'm very proud of Lindsay and Robin and how they have supported me and carried on with their lives and worked, you know, afterwards. Lindsay has, with her friend, has opened a dementia-friendly cafe, and her dad would be so proud.
What a wonderful idea.
Oh, I'm so sorry he won't be here to see how it's going. You know, so the staff are trained in recognising the signs and how to deal with people. So, yes, it is. It's a great idea.
It's wonderful.
Anyway, thank you so much for hearing me.
Thank
No,
you.
not at all. Thank you very much. Did you come over today?
Last night,
Last
actually.
night.
I came over last
When are you
night.
going back?
Tomorrow at lunchtime, so...
So you've got a bit of time to get you to the journey. Have you got somebody with you?
Yes, I have. I have a colleague from the Bereaved Group, Sean, with me.
Good.
So
Well, I think I've seen you before too, haven't I?
yes, we're not going away.
No. Quite right. I'm delighted. So, well, thank you so much for giving what must have been a very distressing account for you? I mean, I can't imagine you. Did you have to pluck your courage?
Oh, well, you know, it's just, I don't want to feel powerless anymore. You know, to watch somebody on their own like that is shocking. It shouldn't happen. But anyway, thank you.
Well, maybe together we can try and make sure that other people don't have to suffer as you and your colleagues have suffered. So I'm really grateful to you. Thank you for coming all the way over and for all the help that you've given to the inquiry.
Thank you, my lady.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think that completes the evidence for today.
That does, my lady.
Very well. 10 o'clock tomorrow, please.